Marcus Elijah Cole was not the kind of man who walked into a room and demanded attention. He did not wear expensive watches to show people he had money. He did not raise his voice in meetings to prove he was in charge. He did not post pictures of his success online to impress strangers. He simply worked. Every single day, quietly, consistently, without stopping. And that silence, that calm, steady, unshakable silence, was the thing that made him the most powerful man in the room, every time. He had grown up with nothing, not the romantic kind of nothing that people describe in motivational speeches. Real nothing. A two-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood, a mother who worked double shifts at a hospital, and a father who left before Marcus was old enough to remember his face. He had no connections, no wealthy uncles, no shortcuts. What he had was a sharp mind, a strong back, and the kind of patience that only comes from watching life take everything from you and choosing not to break. By the time Marcus turned 30, he had built a small delivery company from the ground up. He drove the trucks himself in the beginning. He handled the paperwork at night. He made calls during his lunch breaks. Slowly, painfully, and without anyone handing him anything, he grew that small company into something real. By 42, Cole Logistics had warehouses in 5 cities. It employed over 300 people. It had government contracts, private contracts, and a reputation for being reliable. Marcus was not famous. He was not on magazine covers. But in the world of logistics and supply chain business, his name carried weight. He had one business partner, a man named Devin Marsh. Devin was everything Marcus was not, on the surface. He was tall, well-dressed, and extremely charming. He could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new friends. He had a big laugh and an even bigger personality. He loved attention. He loved being seen. He loved the idea of success almost as much as he loved the appearance of it. The two men met at a business conference 12 years before this story takes place. Devin had approached Marcus with a confident handshake and a bold idea. Marcus had listened carefully, asked the right questions, and within 6 months, they had formed Cole Marsh Logistics together. Marcus built the foundation. Devin built the relationships. It worked well, for a long time. But there is a dangerous thing that happens to some people when they stand close to success for too long. They start to believe they deserve more than they have earned. They start to look at what someone else built and think, this should be mine, not ours, mine. Devin Marsh had been feeling that way for almost 2 years. It started small, the way most dishonest things do. A contract here, redirected to a company Devin had secretly registered under a different name. A client there quietly moved away from Cole Marsh before Marcus noticed. Small amounts of money, moved carefully, in ways that did not raise obvious flags. Devin was not working alone. He had brought 2 other men into his plan. The first was Raymond Holt, an accountant who had worked with Cole Marsh for 4 years. Raymond was quiet, forgettable, the kind of man people looked past in a crowd. But he was very good with numbers, and more importantly, he was willing to make certain numbers disappear for the right price. The second was Greg Sellers, a city councilman with enough political connections to cause real problems for a business if he wanted to. Greg had the ability to delay permits, complicate license renewals, and make a company's life very difficult through the slow machinery of local government. He had done it before to other businesses. He was not shy about doing it again. Together, the 3 of them had a plan. They would bleed Cole Marsh from the inside, drain its accounts slowly, redirect its contracts. And when the company was financially weak enough, they would push Marcus out, buy his share at a fraction of what it was worth, rename the company, and continue as if he had never existed. They were confident, they moved carefully, and they believed, truly believed, that Marcus had no idea. They were wrong. Marcus had known for 11 months. Not suspected, not guessed, known, with evidence. It had started with a small number that did not add up during a quarterly review. Marcus had noticed it almost immediately, a gap between what a contract should have generated and what had actually been deposited. It was small enough that most people would have written it off as an accounting error. Marcus did not write things off. He investigated them. He did not confront Devin. He did not call Raymond into his office. He did not change his behavior in any visible way. He continued going to work every morning. He continued sitting in meetings and nodding at the right moments. He continued shaking Devon's hand and laughing at his jokes. But in private, he was building something that none of them could see. He hired a woman named Lena Park, a forensic accountant with 15 years of experience and an extraordinary ability to follow money through the most complicated paths. He found her through a contact he trusted completely, and he paid her in cash, personally, so that her work would not appear anywhere near the official company accounts. He also contacted a federal attorney named Daniel Price, a quiet and serious man who had spent 20 years handling financial crimes. Marcus met with Daniel 4 times over the course of several months, always in locations that had no connection to his business. He told Daniel everything. He showed Daniel everything. And together, they built a case so careful and so complete that it left no room for doubt. While his enemies celebrated at dinner parties, Marcus was working. While they toasted each other and talked about what they were going to do with Marcus's company once they had it, Marcus was printing documents and organizing folders. While they convinced themselves that his silence was ignorance, his silence was strategy. There is a particular kind of strength that the world rarely talks about. The strength to stay calm when you know you are being wronged. The strength to smile at someone who is working against you. The strength to play the long game when every part of you wants to react immediately. That strength is not natural for most people. It has to be built, the same way muscle is built, through resistance, over time, with discipline. Marcus had spent his entire life building that kind of strength. He let 11 months pass. He let Devon move more money. He let Raymond file more reports. He let Greg Sellers make his phone calls and collect his payments. He let them go further and further down the road they had chosen, because the further they went, the more evidence they created. And with every piece of evidence, the case became stronger. There was one evening, a Friday night in October, when Devon invited Marcus to dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. Devon was in a good mood. He ordered fine food, told long stories, and at one point, raised his glass and toasted to their partnership. "To brothers," Devon said. Marcus raised his glass. "To brothers," he said. And he meant it, in the past tense. The Tuesday in March that changed everything arrived like any other morning. Cool air, a gray sky, the smell of coffee in the hallway outside the conference room where the board meeting was scheduled. People arrived with their notebooks and their laptops and their small talk. Nothing about the morning suggested that by afternoon, 3 men's lives would be permanently changed. Marcus arrived last. He sat down at the head of the table. He placed a single manila folder in front of him, plain, brown, completely ordinary looking. He did not open it immediately. He sat quietly for a moment, while the room settled. Then he said 6 words. "I think you all should read this." He slid the folder to the center of the table. Devon reached for it first, because Devon always reached for things first. He opened it with the casual confidence of a man who had no reason to be afraid. He looked at the first page. His expression did not change immediately. It took a few seconds. Then it changed completely. The folder contained 214 pages. Inside those pages were bank transfer records, contract documents with forged signatures, emails between Devon and Raymond and Greg, phone records, financial statements with highlighted inconsistencies, and 3 signed affidavits from witnesses who had seen things and were willing to say so under oath. Lena Park had done extraordinary work. Every dollar that had been moved dishonestly was accounted for. Every document that had been changed was shown side by side with the original. Every conversation that had been captured was printed and time-stamped. It was not a file, it was a wall. Raymond Holt stood up quietly and left the room. No one tried to stop him. He went into the hallway and called his lawyer. His hands were shaking. Greg Sellers did not stand up. He sat very still, staring at the table, as if looking at the surface of it might help him think of something to say. He could not think of anything. Devon looked up from the folder and looked at Marcus. For a long moment, neither man spoke. There were no words that would have helped Devon, and Marcus did not need any. Marcus stood, buttoned his jacket, and left the room. He had filed the civil lawsuit 3 weeks earlier. He had notified the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit 2 weeks earlier. He had already registered Cole Enterprises as a separate and entirely new business, with no connection to anything Devon's name had touched. By the time Devon was still sitting at that conference table, trying to understand what had just happened, federal investigators were already on their way to the building. Marcus went home. He had lunch with his wife, a quiet woman named Claire who had known something was wrong for months, but had trusted her husband when he said, "There's a season for everything." She placed a bowl of soup in front of him and sat across the table and asked, simply, "Is it done?" "It's done," he said. She nodded. They ate in comfortable silence. The legal process moved the way legal processes do, slowly, but with great certainty. The trial lasted 8 months. Every piece of evidence that Marcus and Lena Park and Daniel Price had assembled held up completely. There was simply too much of it, and it was too carefully organized for any of the 3 men to find a way around it. Devon Marsh was found guilty of wire fraud and embezzlement. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. When the verdict was read, he looked smaller than Marcus had ever seen him, smaller than his expensive suits, smaller than his big personality, smaller than all the space he had always taken up in every room he had ever walked into. Raymond Holt lost his accounting license. He faced civil damages that would take him years to pay off. The quiet, forgettable man who had been so careful with other people's numbers had not been careful enough with his own choices. Greg Sellers resigned from the city council before the trial reached its conclusion. He released a public statement that used careful language to say very little. His political career, built over 18 years, was finished in a matter of weeks. People who had once lined up to shake his hand stopped returning his calls. Marcus said nothing publicly through the entire process. Not one interview, not one social media post, not one statement released through a representative. When reporters contacted his office, they were told politely that Mr. Cole had no comment. When people who knew him asked how he felt, he gave a small smile and changed the subject. He was already too busy building to look back. Cole Enterprises launched officially during the final months of the trial, almost as if it had been timed that way. And it had been. Marcus had used the months of legal proceedings to finalize partnerships, sign new contracts, and quietly bring over several of Cole Marsh's most reliable employees, who had been loyal to him personally and wanted to continue working for someone they respected. Within 18 months of launch, Cole Enterprises crossed $60 million in revenue. Within 2 years, it had expanded into international logistics, forming a partnership with a European firm that brought new clients, new contracts, and new opportunities that the old business never could have reached. Marcus hired well. He paid his people fairly. He made decisions carefully and never rushed simply because someone was pressuring him. The culture of the company reflected the man who built it, disciplined, steady, and completely uninterested in shortcuts. One afternoon, a young man who worked in Marcus's warehouse asked him something that no one else had been direct enough to ask. "Mr. Cole," the young man said, "when you found out what they were doing, all those months before, how did you not just say something? How did you keep quiet for that long?" Marcus thought about the question for a moment. "Because saying something would have felt good for about 10 minutes, he said. "And staying quiet gave me everything permanently." He paused. "A man who reacts gives the other person control. A man who responds, on his own time, in his own way, keeps it." The young man nodded slowly, the way people nod when they hear something simple that they know they will think about for a long time. There was one other thing Marcus did that very few people knew about. Sometime during the second year of Cole Enterprises, he made an anonymous donation of $1.2 million to a youth business mentorship program in the neighborhood where he had grown up. The program helped young people from difficult backgrounds learn basic financial literacy, business planning, and professional skills. It funded after-school programs, paid for certifications, and gave small startup grants to young people with real ideas and no resources. Marcus never attached his name to it. He never mentioned it in conversation. He did not do it for recognition. He did it because he remembered being a young man in that same neighborhood with no one to show him the path, and he believed quietly but deeply that the most meaningful use of what he had built was to make the path easier for someone else. A journalist found out eventually. the way journalists always do. She tracked the donation back to Marcus through a series of patient and careful steps, and she called his office to ask for a comment. His assistant delivered the message. Marcus's response was 4 words. "I have no comment." The journalist wrote the story anyway. It ran on a Tuesday morning. Marcus did not read it. He was already in a meeting, already planning the next thing, already 3 steps ahead of where anyone expected him to be. Someone asked him once, a business colleague at a private event, a man who had followed Marcus's career with great interest, what he considered to be his greatest strength. Marcus did not answer immediately. He held his glass. He looked across the room at nothing in particular. Then he said something the colleague never forgot. "Most people think power is loud," Marcus said. "They think if you're not talking, you're not winning. They think silence means you have nothing to say." He paused. But the most dangerous thing in any situation is someone who sees everything, says nothing, and moves at exactly the right moment. He set his glass down. "My greatest strength is that I have never confused noise with progress." The colleague thought about that for a long time, and Marcus walked away, quietly, without looking back, the way he always had, the way he always would. His enemies had been loud. They had planned openly and celebrated early and moved with the confidence of people who believed no one was watching. They had dug their own holes while Marcus simply held the map. He never needed to destroy them. They destroyed themselves. He never needed to announce his victory. The results announced it for him. And long after the headlines disappeared, long after the courtrooms emptied, and the legal documents were filed away, Marcus Elijah Cole was still doing exactly what he had always done. He was working. He was building. He was silent. And he was winning.